Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the analysis of the Hindu newspaper for today. But before we begin, a couple of important announcements. As you know, a couple of days back we started a Telegram exclusive series on political thinkers. If you are a part of the Byjus Exam Prep IAS Telegram channel, you will get exclusive access to videos on political thinkers. Today at 7 p.m., we will release a video on Machiavelli. If you are still not a part of the Telegram channel, please join it by using the link given in the description of the video. This series of political thinkers, which includes Western and Indian thinkers, is extremely important for a lot of papers. The GS4 paper, ethics, the essay paper, and a lot of optionals including PSIR, sociology, PubAd, etc. Also, tonight's explained session, which will go live on the same YouTube channel where you're watching this video now at 8 p.m., will be on the upcoming SCO Summit. We'll be discussing the significance of this summit, the history, and what can India gain out of this particular summit this time around. Let's come back to the Hindu newspaper for today. The first article that we have is written by a retired IAS officer, and he is making a point that the parliamentary committees that we have in the parliament, that is, the department parliamentary standing committees, have not been utilized to their fullest. As you would have realized, if you read the newspapers, usually in the past few years, the opposition members especially have been criticizing the government, saying that the government of India does not give any bill to the parliamentary committees for discussion. Usually, when a bill is introduced in any house of the parliament, it is given to a departmental parliamentary committee. The reason for this is that those committees have members from almost all political parties. They will scrutinize the bill, they will examine each and every provision of the bill, and then they will suggest to the specific ministry whether or not some changes are required in the bill or not, so that a proper, perfect bill can be introduced. However, in the past few years, what we have seen is the government not giving any bill to the committee, just introducing it in the parliament, using their brute majority force to get the bill passed within a few days. In this aspect, what happened in the last session of the parliament is a very encouraging sign. The author says, in the recent parliamentary session, that is the monsoon session that we had, two very important bills, that is the Competition Amendment Bill 2022 and the Electricity Amendment Bill 2022, both of these were actually given to the Standing Committee of Parliament for a detailed examination. Now, if this would have happened a few years earlier, no one would have discussed this. But now it is discussed because the government usually is not in favor of giving their bills to these committees. That is why it is seen as a positive sign from the government of India. The author says that the reason why the government of India does not want to give these bills to these committees is because the government thinks it will delay the bill. See, when the committee gives any suggestions with regards to a bill, you also know these suggestions are never binding on the government. So at the end of the day, if the government really wants to pass the bill, the committee cannot stop them. The only thing that the committee can do is maybe give some good suggestions, maybe give some more ideas to the government, but at the end of the day, a government in majority will not have any problem in passing the bill. But the government thinks that these committees take a lot of time, they just keep on discussing very small matters for months and months, and the bill usually gets delayed. And that is why the government has not really been in favor of giving bills to the committee. This can be seen in the numbers as well. For example, the author says that if you look at the previous Lok Sabhas and compare them with the present Lok Sabha, you will see the stark difference. From 2004 to 2009, 60% bills were given to these committees. 2009 to 2014, 71% bills were given to such committees. Then 2014 to 2019, when we had a change in the government, in the last Lok Sabha, only 27% bills were given to such committees. At present, in the ongoing Lok Sabha, the number has not even touched 20%. This is a major cause of concern. The author says that the departmental related parliamentary committees, as all of you would have read in Indian polity, there are 24 of them. These departmental committees, each of these have 31 members. These members come from both the houses, usually in a 2:1 ratio. So basically 21 members that you will have are from Lok Sabha, while 10 members will be from the Rajya Sabha. And this is not just in India. The author says that almost every parliamentary democracy around the world, would have a similar kind of a process where the bills are introduced and then they're given to a committee which has members from almost all political parties, the opposition party, the ruling party, and then they examine the bill. So it's nothing that we are doing in a very unique manner. Rather, if we go away from this particular method, we will actually be having very low quality laws, and the author says that this practice must be followed. One other very interesting thing about these committees is that within these committees, although we have members from all the political parties, but they are not bound by their whip. Meaning that when a person is part of such a committee, he or she usually expresses their personal point of view rather than thinking from their party's point of view. So there may be a Congress member of parliament who in the committee will actually speak his own point of view rather than his own party's point of view. The same can happen with a BJP member as well. And this is where such committees can actually bring in a lot of great suggestions for the government. And in the end, if a good law is passed, the credit will always go to the government only. That is why the author says that there is no reason for the government to shy away from these committees. Rather, most of the bills should go through this only. The author here gives 7 suggestions of what can we do to make sure that more bills now go to the committee rather than directly being passed. The first suggestion is that right now, the Lok Sabha Speaker or Rajya Sabha Chairperson, they decide whether a bill will go to the committee or not. Rather than that, what we should do is, it should be an automatic process. That automatically the bills should go to the committee. If there are some bills for which we don't have enough time to pass, for them exemption may be given by speaker or chairman, but by default every bill should go to the committee. This is the first suggestion. Second suggestion is that no whip of the party should apply. That happens even today, but generally the rule should be that no particular member of the committee should be bound by their party's thinking. The third suggestion is that the committee should be given a fixed time limit to come up with the recommendations so that the government's fear that the bill is delayed is not really true. Fourth, to ensure quality work, we may invite outside experts also and not just the members of parliament in such committees. Fifth, the speaker or the chairperson can fix a time limit by themselves, especially if the government asks for it, then the time limit will be set in a very strict manner. Next, whenever there is a gap between the two sessions of the parliament, the committees should work during this gap so that the time is utilized. And last but not the least, when it comes to passing the budget proposals for specific ministries, the committees should not just limit themselves to discussing what the budget is. Rather, they should also come up with suggestions for the government of how to make better use of the budget. Remember, these are not the rules right now. These are just suggestions given by the author as to how can we actually improve the working of the parliament overall and bring back the importance of such department related parliamentary committees. Now, the debate of the Parliament of India losing its significance and decreasing productivity of the Parliament is a very old debate. I just wanted to give you a few examples so that you can quote them in the answer writing as well. I'll give you examples of some of the laws that were passed recently, last year specifically, within a matter of a few days without even going to any of the committees. Even if you look at the duration of the parliament sessions, they have been curtailed very, very significantly. Like the budget session of last year ended 2 weeks before the planned closure. The budget session of 2020 anyways was a very, very short session due to the pandemic that the country was going through. In fact, last year in the budget session, 13 bills were passed, 8 of which were passed within the session and they were not really referred to any committee. For example, the Government of Delhi Amendment Bill got passed in 10 days. The Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill got passed within a week. The National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, that is NABFID bill, got passed within 3 days. Now you might say that quicker the bills pass, the better it is because the laws will come into force. But when you're talking about national laws that will impact so many people in the country, these kind of laws demand a certain level of debate and discussion from all members of the parliament, which has not been happening. One more example of the decreasing productivity of the parliament is what you can see here. This is a graphic that shows you the productivity of Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha in the last concluded session. So I'm talking about the 2022 monsoon session which just concluded. Look at the productivity. Productivity means the number of hours out of the scheduled number of hours that the parliament actually had a sitting. 47 out of 150, 42 out of 150 for Rajya Sabha. So it's extremely low. When you consider that the parliament does not even meet throughout the year, they only meet for 3 sessions, you combine all of them, it is not even 90 days that they have a meeting. And even for those 90 days, if you see so many disruptions, that is just an unfortunate situation for the country as a whole. The next article that we have here is about something interesting that happened recently. The author here is pointing out towards Grand Challenge 1. Now, what was Grand Challenge 1? See, the government of India a few months back decided that the target for the country should be that by 2030, India should have 50,000 electric buses, the buses for public transportation. Now, the problem here is right now the transportation system, the public transportation system is mostly run by the state governments. So, in Delhi, for example, how many buses will be bought, at what price they will be bought is decided by the Delhi government. Same with Maharashtra, same with Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, Telangana, so on and so forth. So, the problem here is right now, every state, when they have to buy a new bus, for example, they will go to the market alone, they will search for the best seller, and because they are not buying a lot of buses in a bunch, they can't really negotiate. So now what happened was that there was an effort by the central government that multiple states should come together and the central government will place an order for huge number of buses all together so that they can negotiate in a much better manner. This tender challenge was called the Grand Challenge 1, under which close to 5,500 buses were ordered, combined for 5 major cities: Kolkata, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Surat. These are all electric buses. And because the order was given all together, it gave a much better negotiating power through the central government, and that is why the buses were acquired at a very low cost. This is what the article is. That is, if we follow such examples of cooperative federalism, that is the states and the center coming together, both the parties trusting each other, we can have a much better situation in the future. That is when both the states and the centers come together, try and acquire stuff in one go, the negotiating power becomes much stronger. The author says that right now India has 1,40,000 public buses, out of which 40,000 of them are almost at the end of their lifespan and they need to be replaced as soon as possible. Understand this. If you talk about the public buses, they run every single day. Most of them run 24 hours. If not 24, most of them run at least 12 hours a day, day in and day out. So obviously there's a lot of wear and tear in these buses. Their life is not as long as some of the other buses that don't run that much. That is why they run out of their life very soon and they have to be replaced. The state governments have their own problems. The state governments don't earn a lot of money from the state transportation because most of the state governments, when they offer the bus services to the people, they offer it at a subsidized price. When you travel in a public bus in any city in India, you will see the ticket prices are very low. That is because the state government is subsidizing that. As a result of which the state government does not have a lot of money, because of which they can't really buy a lot of buses. This is where the central government has come in the picture and combined the efforts of multiple cities in India to acquire buses. The idea is that we will have to replace the entire public bus system in India with electric buses, and that will happen gradually. A very important role in this entire process was played by CESL. Do you remember this name? CESL stands for Convergence Energy Services Limited. Now, this is an agency that works under the Government of India. This agency was responsible for collaborating with all these state governments and making sure that one common tender is then given out by the government. Now, CESL is not a new agency. I will show you some of the other examples as well. CESL is an agency working with the Government of India to ensure that India's push towards renewable energy is actually accelerated. And this is not the first scheme that they are a part of here. In fact, the author here that has written this article is the CEO of CESL only. That is why she has given all these details from the point of view of the company itself. Electric buses, as you know, would be much more friendly for the environment in the long run. They have also come at a much cheaper cost because a tender was put together. They have come at a cheaper cost as compared to diesel or even the CNG buses. Now, the government is aiming to have 50,000 of the electric buses across 40 cities in the country. But as per the author, to achieve that, this kind of an experiment should be replicated. That is, the state governments should come together along with the center government to put in tenders all together to have a much greater negotiating power. Now, as I said, CESL is not a new agency. You might have heard about it multiple times. See, it was in Jan 2022 that the entire process started, where CESL floated the tender combining multiple cities, Bangalore, Delhi, Surat, Hyderabad, Kolkata, in order to acquire buses for them all together. Then, CESL has also been working to improve the EV charging infrastructure in the country. Not just this, they were also part of other schemes. For example, they signed an agreement with the Delhi government to buy e-rickshaws at a subsidized rate, where the Delhi government will give interest subvention. That is, the Delhi government pay a part of the interest. CESL has also been a part of the Indian government's initiative to replace the older bulbs with LED bulbs. So as I said, this is not a new agency that has just started to work. They have been a part of a lot of government initiatives in the field of renewable energy for some time now. This works under the Government of India. It's a nodal agency of the Government of India, and its main target is to ensure that government's push towards renewable energy, electric mobility and climate change is accelerated. So they are forming increasing number of partnerships, increasing collaboration among the states and the center government for this purpose. The next article that we have here is in the form of an interview. Now, the reason why this article has been written is a few days back, former governor of the RBI, that is Mr. Raghuram Rajan, said that the Government of India's plan of PLI scheme, that is Production Linked Incentive Scheme, does not really work in favor of India, and rather government should focus on services. Now let me try and explain what this is. See, there are different sectors of an economy. There is a manufacturing sector, as all of you are aware. There is a services sector as well. India right now gets most of its GDP from the services sector. The problem with the service sector, however, is that it does not produce a lot of employment. If you have to produce a lot of employment, if you have to set up factories that employ thousands and lakhs of people, that has to be in the field of manufacturing only. This is why the Government of India has been trying to give a lot of push towards manufacturing. For this, the government introduced something called PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. In simple terms, the Government of India said to certain industries that if you produce above a certain quantity, then the government will give you subsidy. So depending upon the target, if the target has been achieved, then the government will give you subsidy. Meaning that it is encouraging the companies to produce more stuff, to employ more people, and then when they get subsidy from the side of the government, it will then convert into a cycle and they will keep on employing more and more people. In simple terms, this is called Production Linked Incentive Scheme. Raghuram Rajan has said that this will not work in favor of India because the Indian economic problems are very different. This article here is in the form of an interview where two very well educated professionals are giving their view in this regard. So our intention is to take out pointers related to our examinations from this particular article. Now the interview here say that Government of India should not really focus only on manufacturing. Why? They say that there is no way to predict which one sector will be the one that will be successful in the future. So to assume that manufacturing will be the one that will be successful, services will not be successful is a wrong assumption. That is why, as per the interview, rather than the government focusing on only one sector, let's say manufacturing, the job of the government should be to create a good environment for all the sectors. Why only focus on giving a push to manufacturing? Why not services? Why not agriculture as well? Government should rather create a broad environment and not just focus on schemes such as PLI. On the other hand, the second interview has a different point of view. He says that if you look at developed nations and even developing nations around the country, you will see that this is a proven method. That is, if any country wants to succeed, if any country wants to emerge as a developed nation, their path has to go through manufacturing, it has to go through industrial policy. Look at what is happening in Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, US, China. There are umpteen examples of nations focusing on industry and manufacturing to get their path towards being a developed nation. In fact, look at US just now. 2022 CHIPS Act in the US was passed, where the US government will spend $50 billion to give incentives to companies to set up more semiconductor industry and factories in the country. The same is happening in Taiwan, South Korea, etc. So to say that no, it is not compulsory that manufacturing only will lead to development is actually a wrong assumption. We must learn from our history and see what the other nations also are doing. And thus, as per the second interviewee, schemes such as a PLI is still very good and it should be continued for the government to give a push to India's development. He also says that the country's development on its industrial policy depends on how strong the leader is. Take an example of the former Prime Minister of Singapore that has been credited with all of Singapore's success that we see today, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. He was the one who was responsible for turning Singapore into the investment destination that it is for the entire world right now. Also, the policies of the government of India must be made keeping in mind the demand of Indians right now. For example, we are facing a huge unemployment problem in India. That is why all the government policies have to be made in such a manner that those problems are resolved. So rather than thinking what will work, what will not work, as per the interview, we should focus on manufacturing because we have to solve the unemployment problem in India, and once that is resolved, all the other things will fall into place. Not just this, the two interviews also have different points of view on PLI, that is performance linked incentive. While one of them is saying that rather than the government opting for PLI or performance linked incentive, government should actually focus on the real problem. Just giving subsidy is a short-term solution. The government should look at why is it that doing business in India is very difficult. If, for example, the problem is with the tax laws and the government should improve the tax laws. If the problem is with the labor laws, that we should focus on labor laws. Rather than just giving subsidy to the companies, our focus should be to solve the real problems that are making their job difficult. The other interview, on the other hand, is saying that PLI is very fair. Why? Because there are certain targets that are set by the government. Those companies that achieve it will get the subsidy. Those that don't achieve it will not get the incentive. As simple as that. So there are different points of view amongst the experts also. From the examination point of view, it is important for us to have points on both sides of the argument. And that is why these kind of interviews give a lot of good pointers to you if you have to write pros and cons about such a particular scheme in the examination. Now, the Niti Aayog also has said in the past few months that the PLI schemes of the government of India need to have certain changes because the objective of the PLI scheme, that is performance linked incentive scheme, has still not been met. So Niti Aayog is also monitoring the performance of these schemes in the long run. Now let me give you a bit of background detail about the PLI schemes and how did it actually start. If you look at the beginning of these schemes, it all began in March 2020 when the government of India announced that we will be focusing on three industries mainly: mobile and allied component manufacturing, electric component manufacturing, and medical devices. The government said that we will be focusing on these three. Any company, any organization working in this field, and if they achieve a certain target, we will be giving them certain incentives. Incentives will be calculated on the basis of incremental sale. So how much sales are increasing year after year? 1% increment, 20% increment, all these kind of things will be taken into consideration. Then the government of India later on introduced a similar kind of scheme for other sectors as well. Right now the PLI schemes are running in many different sectors including auto components, textile and apparels, metals and mining, solar modules, pharmaceuticals, etc. If you observe this very carefully, most of these sectors that the government of India has chosen are those where China dominates. So we are trying to pull all this manufacturing within our country rather than taking goods from outside the country, specifically from China. There are also some problems with the PLI scheme, because of which Niti Aayog has now stepped in to monitor the performance. For example, first problem is that there are no common set of parameters. So Government of India has not been very clear about what are the different targets that have to be achieved by different companies. There are various targets set by the Government of India. Some targets include how many jobs are produced, some targets include how much are you producing, how much are you selling, etc. So there's no clarity on that. Secondly, targets for some of the companies are very tough to achieve. So for example, I'll tell you that I am willing to give you 10 lakh rupees. But how? I will give you 10 lakh rupees if in the UPSC examination you get score of 150 in the prelims. Now you also know that getting 150 in the prelims is very difficult. Hardly anyone would get a score of 150. But I say that I will be giving an incentive to you. I'll give you 10 lakh rupees or 1 crore rupees if you actually achieve the aim of 115 prelims. So on one way you can say that I am trying to incentivize you, but on the other hand you also know that this target is almost impossible to achieve. This is what the government has been doing as per many experts. Thirdly, the domestic companies still rely on very few supply chains. So even if the companies in India are trying to produce within India, they are still getting their components from foreign companies, and that is why they're all dependent on them only. Because many of these get their components from foreign countries such as China, many of them are not even eligible to actually get any incentive under this scheme. These are some of the problems because of which, as per experts, no real benefits are being given to companies on the ground under the PLI scheme. The next article that we have here is about the Eastern Economic Forum. The Eastern Economic Forum is in the news because recently Russia hosted the 7th edition from 5th to the 8th of September. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was a part of this, but only in the online version. So he did give a speech in this forum, but online without going to Russia. Now, this Eastern Economic Forum is an initiative of Russia. The primary objective being at the far east side of Russia, Russia wants to develop that. If you look at how the Russian territory is, the far eastern side, which borders Japan, for example, it does not have a lot of development. It doesn't have a lot of infrastructure. Although it has a lot of resources, it has a lot of oil and gas resources, it has a lot of forest resources, minerals, etc. But Russia has not put a lot of investment there. So rather than putting their own money, what Russia has been trying to do in the form of Eastern Economic Forum is Russia has been inviting other countries around the world like China, India, Japan, South Korea, asking them, why don't you invest your money in our region? And whatever you find out from this region, like minerals, oil and gas, you will keep a part of it and we will keep a part of it. So countries are being encouraged by Russia to invest in their far east, find out mineral resources, build infrastructure, and then gain in the future. For this purpose, the Eastern Economic Forum meetings are held starting from 2015. As a result of this, now close to 2,729 investment projects are already being planned in the region, ranging from infrastructure, transportation, agriculture, industry, construction, and all. As expected, China is the biggest investor in the region, and about 90% of total investment in the region is from the Chinese. The Chinese see this as a very good way to promote their Belt and Road Initiative and reach the Arctic Pole as well. We also have the Trans-Siberian Railway there, which gives a very good connectivity between Russia and China. That is why China has been extremely interested in using their cash to develop this particular area of Russia. Now, if you are confused, let me show you a map of how this place is so that you can actually understand. If this is Russia entirely, this brown area is called the far east part of Russia. As you can see, this is just adjacent to Japan. It also shares its border with China. This is the region that we are talking about. This is the region where Russia is looking for a lot of investment. Now, while China is at the very top of investing in this region, there are other countries also like South Korea and Japan that have also invested here. Now, there's one very interesting point here. Historically, Japan and Russia have not had very good relations. You all know about the famous 1905 war where Japan defeated the Russians. Japan and Russia still have disputes over certain islands. But even then, Japan has been interested in investing in Russia. In fact, they have invested in 21 projects which are close to $16 billion. The reason is that after the Fukushima tragedy of Japan, Japan has been closing down its nuclear power plants and focusing more on natural gas and oil that can come in from Russia, since Russia is geographically very, very close to Japan. That is why they have also been interested here. But the problem is, ever since Shinzo Abe, who is no more now, ever since Shinzo Abe stepped down from the prime minister position, the next prime ministers have not really been very interested in investing in Russia. So that has dropped down. Then comes the role of India. India has also invested considerably in this region. In fact, multiple Indian companies in the field of energy, pharmaceutical, etc., have made very, very good connections and collaborations with the Russian companies. In 2019, India offered $1 billion line of credit to develop the infrastructure in this region. India called it the Act Far East policy. Not just this, many Indian companies, including ONGC, have also signed contracts with companies of Russia to explore the oil and gas resources in the Russian Far East region. One other very interesting point of view is how would India be able to manage two very, very different groups? The EEF, that is the Eastern Economic Forum, and the IPEF, that is led by the US. As you know, we have read about the IPEF. This is a group led by the US. This is not really a free trade agreement. This is mostly an agreement where nations in the Pacific Ocean, including India and US, are coming together to form a kind of an economic partnership to ensure that the trade between these nations becomes much, much smoother. India right now has a tough job at its hand of balancing these two opposite groups, since ever since the Ukraine-Russia war has broken out, we have seen increasing hostilities between US and Russia. This is the Russian Far East region, as I told you. As I said, the Indian companies have been increasingly interested in investing in Russia. ONGC Videsh, that takes care of oil exploration projects outside India, has actually signed a deal with Russia for its Far East region in the Sakhalin-1 oil and gas field. The ONGC Videsh Limited also brought Imperial Energy, which has fields in Siberia, to ensure that any gas and oil resources in those areas can be exploited by India as well. We also have the Indian Oil Corporation and its partners that have picked a 29.9% stake in oil field in East Siberia as well. Russia, anyways, has always been a good partner for India, both at the international level and for bilateral interest of India as well. Both the countries, as you know, are also collaborating to set up Bangladesh's first ever nuclear power plant in the coming months. The next article that we have here is an interesting news, that is, the Bar Council of India has resolved that they will push the government to increase the retirement age of judges in the Supreme Court and the High Court. They say that for High Court, the retirement age should be increased from 62 to 65. For Supreme Court, the retirement age should increase from 65 to 67 at least. Now, the interesting part is this is not the first time something like this has been in the news. Every single year, you see some demands being made from the government of India to increase the age of the retirement for Supreme Court, High Court judges, and the government not really taking it seriously. This was earlier this year when the government announced that we don't have any proposal to increase the retirement age of High Court or Supreme Court judges. Now, the idea of retirement age being increased is mainly seen as a solution to the large number of pending cases that we have in the country. As you know, the Indian judiciary is under so much workload right now that the number of pending cases in the judiciary in India is right now close to 4 crore. And because of that, people believe that since we have so many educated, so many experienced judges, there is no point of forcing them to retire. Why are you forcing anyone to retire if they are still in a sound mental and physical state of mind? And if they are still able to continue work, why are you forcing them to sit at home? This demand of judges' retirement age increasing has been a very, very old demand. Let me actually give you a brief history of this particular demand and also compare this with some of the other nations around the world. Now, this demand goes back to the time of the Venkatachalya report. Venkatachalya report is also called the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution. They recommended increasing the retirement age of High Court judges to 65 and Supreme Court judges to 68. In fact, the Constitution Amendment Bill for this purpose was introduced in 2010, but the Lok Sabha lapsed, and because of that lapse of Lok Sabha, it was not taken up further. If you look at the Western nations across the world, Most Western nations go by 70 as a retirement age for judges, like Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands, etc. We also have an example of US, where in the US Supreme Court there is no retirement age of judges. Judges in the US Supreme Court, for example, are appointed for life. Same is with Austria and Greece. So there are other examples as well. The argument for 65 being the retirement age is that science has proven that after a person achieves the age of 65, the person's mental deterioration and physical deterioration starts, and that is why they may not be trusted with some of the most important responsibilities. And that is why the argument of 65 years still remains. However, we should not ignore the fact that the number of judges in India are some of the lowest in the world if you look at per capita population. India's judge to population ratio is among the lowest in the world at not even 20 judges per 10 lakh people. While UK has 51, US had 107 judges per 10 lakh people. In that sense, also, India should buckle up and increase the number of judges. One other counter argument is that if the government believes that 65 is the age up till which the people can work properly, then why is it that after 65 the same judges are expected to work in tribunals, are expected to work in commissions, Lokpal, NHRC, etc.? What happens then? Why is it that we trust them to work in those organizations and not as judges? There is no reason why judges should be retired so early as per the people who support this argument. We can also look at a practice that is prevalent in Zimbabwe. So, in Zimbabwe, in their Supreme Court, a judge can retire at the age of 65, but he can also continue or opt in to continue till 70. So, they don't have a compulsory retirement policy of 65. The judge may retire and may continue also, which can be the way forward for India as well. These are the important topics on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, considering the large number of pending cases in the courts in India, discuss the merits and demerits in the idea of increasing the retirement age of judges in the country. Second, cooperative federalism has the potential to solve a plethora of underlying problems for both center and the states in India. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.